And is that anything unusual given the fact that she was in jail?
No.
Objection, speculation. Knowledge of.
Now, with regard to the administration of the tests involving Mr. Alexander and her relationship to Mr. Alexander, what time period did you reference or indicate to her that the questions applied?
I wanted to be expansive, so what I did is I had her think back to January of 2007. The reason why I chose that date is because she indicated that he started to, albeit jokingly, but making comments to her that she didn't like.
And take a look at Exhibit 620 and see if that refreshes your recollection as to what your results were. So what were the results of the TSI for that January 2007 period?
Again, very similar results. The most notable difference was that during that time, she was having sexual concerns, uneasiness about her sexual behavior.
And so when you say they were about the same, is she having anxiety? Is that what was going on, or what?
Yes, anxiety, depression, indication of nightmares, intrusive thoughts.
It appears that, I guess, for lack of a better term, the profiles were the same, both in January of 2007 and when she was in jail and you administered the test.
Objection, reading.
Overall.
Relatively the same. There were some differences.
This testing that you conducted, did you also conduct further testing? Did you conduct further testing other than this TSI, this trauma symptom inventory?
Yes.
Did you review Mr. Samuel's report to see whether or not he had administered something called a PDS?
Yes.
Objection, judges, to the referral as Mr. Samuels when he's a doctor. Sustained.
All right, Ms. DeMarte. With regard to Dr. Samuel's...
Immediately, judges, disrespect.
With regard to Dr. Samuel's report, did he administer a PDS?
Correct.
What does PDS stand for?
Post-traumatic stress diagnosis.
All right, you can hear the back and forth there as Juan Martinez calls Richard Samuels Mr., and the defense wants the proper Dr. Samuels, just part of the infighting between the two sides. We've hit pause. We're back with more.
And what is this test looking to do?
The test is administered to determine whether there's the presence of post-traumatic stress disorder.
And were you able to look, well, what is it that Dr. Samuels provided to you in terms of the raw data?
Essentially a bubble sheet.
And when you say essentially a bubble sheet, what are we talking about?
It's raw data from the PDS.
And what is a bubble sheet? Explain to me. We all have seen bubble sheets, but how was this, to your understanding, how was this bubble sheet created?
Well, typically the answer sheet is given to the person that's being evaluated, and they fill it out themselves as they're reading the questions that are on the questionnaire.
For example, when you've administered these tests to other people, do you provide them with the test-approved sheet in which to mark the bubbles, if it is a bubble-type test? Do you do that?
Do I give it to them?
In other words, you administered the the MMPI, correct?
That's correct.
Is that also a bubble type of test?
Yes.
With regard to this bubble type test, did you, when you administer it, do you actually write the responses down on a legal pad and then transfer them for the person that you're testing onto the bubble sheet, or do you just give them the bubble sheet to fill it out?
No, the answer sheet is given to them, and they fill it out themselves.
Why not just do it on a legal pad as you sit there and ask them the questions? Why don't you do it that way?
That's not the protocol of giving the tests.
Is there a danger if you are filling out, for example, the answers and then transferring them over to the bubble sheet?
Sure, there's human error that's involved.
And is that the protocol that's followed in administering these type of tests?
No.
So you were provided with the bubble sheet. correct? With regard to the PDS, right?
That's correct.
And what was your understanding as to who filled out the bubble sheet when it was given to you?
I was under the impression Ms. Arias did.
And again, if Ms. Arias hadn't filled it out, would that, in your opinion, just your opinion, would that be a problem with the protocol in administering the PDS test or any test?
Yes, if there wasn't an extreme reason as to why that had to occur.
As you sit here today, can you think of an extreme reason why the person who is having the test administered is not filling out the bubble sheet?
No.
So you were provided, though, with the bubble sheet, right?
Yes.
But in and of itself, the bubble sheet, does it tell you anything independent of looking at other sources? By just looking at these bubbles filled out, does it tell you anything?
No, it wasn't scored. It was just the raw data.
And did you have to look at somewhere else to look at the questions?
Yes.
And is that something else that's, as a psychologist, you have to go out and get, correct?
That's correct.
Was that provided by Dr. Samuels or not?
No, it was not.
So did you go out and get or obtain a copy of the test itself so that you could compare it then to what was on the bubble sheet?
Yes, I did.
And when you did that, what is it that you...
All right, hitting the pause button there is Juan Martinez. He's attacking Dr. Samuel's methods, the protocol of administering this test, that Jodie Arias should have filled in the bubble sheet herself and not Samuel's transferring data. We'll have much more of this murder trial coming up. Stay with us. Yeah. Prosecution's rebuttal case really going after Dr. Samuels and Alice LaViolette, the defense's experts. Let's hit play and let's go back in.
So did you go out and get or obtain a copy of the test itself so that you could compare it then to what was on the bubble sheet?
Yes, I did.
And when you did that, what is it that you found with regard to the question that talks about the triggering mechanism for PTSD?
I found that she indicated that it was an event that occurred with a stranger.
And if in this case it's been determined that the event that we're talking about did not involve a stranger, it actually involved Mr. Alexander, if that were the case, what would that do to all of the answers that followed?
It would invalidate it. Can I explain why?
Sure.
PTSD is one of those disorders, one of the only disorders that we have as psychologists that we can directly link back the etiology, meaning where did this come from? It's a specific trauma. And the PDS actually does a good job because it asks for the exact trauma to be identified up front. And the symptoms that are then filled out are associated with that trauma. So for example, I have nightmares about that trauma. I have intrusive thoughts about that specific trauma. Again, there's a direct link. So in this situation, if the original item was, you said it was related to, was found what?
Well, let's say the answer that you looked at involved what? What was the trigger event on the PDS that you had?
That it was by an individual that was a stranger.
What if it turned out that that was an absolute untruth? That it wasn't a stranger, it was somebody that she actually knew. You indicated that that would invalidate the rest of the test, right?
It would absolutely invalidate the test.
Well, what about the position that, for example, that says, well, she still suffered trauma, it's just that maybe it was a white lie that she told about what the triggering event was. If it was just a white lie, and all of this other stuff here refers to the white lie, does that somehow validate this test?
It does not, again, because PTSD is strongly tied to what the actual trauma is.
So in terms of this PDS, if the trauma was not related to a stranger, in terms of the opinion in this case, is it worth anything?
No, other than it's other evidence that Ms. Arias decided to lie on a test.
Objection, Judge. May we approach? May approach.
The courtroom right before the break as Janeen DeMarte basically said as she's looking at this test and basically intimating Just another lie as Jodie Arias took the test, which would invalidate the test results. So let's hit that play button and see where we go next.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sustaining the objection to the last question. You are to disregard the last answer. Dr. DeMarte, please listen carefully to the question being asked and answer only the question being asked. Mr. Martinez, you may continue.
Mr. Marte, with regard to the changed story, do you know whether or not, or is it your understanding that the event that was cited as the triggering event for this PDS has subsequently changed in terms of what the defendant is saying?
I'm aware of that.
And because there's been this change to this other event where the defendant indicated that it was Mr. Alexander and her killing him that caused this trauma, do you have an opinion as to whether or not this PDS is valid as a confirmatory test for PTSD?
It is not valid.
And why not? Why isn't it valid? Especially in light of the fact that they're both trauma.
The questions on the test specifically go back and ask the person to reference the specific trauma that they identified on the test. She identified a different trauma, and so all of her questions, again, such as I have intrusive memories, were related to that event.
And in scoring this test, have you seen the scoring sheets in this case?
No,
Let's take, so they were not provided to you by Dr. Samuels.
that's correct.
Exhibit number 550. Do you see there the number of symptoms endorsed is 17?
Yes.
Once this test, and then we'll take a look at exhibit number 535, and then you see the number of symptoms endorsed. Do you see that?
Yes.
Obviously, those are two different results, correct?
Correct.
In your practice, once something has been scored, something such as this has been scored, is there a reason, and you've reached your hypothesis, and this confirms it, is there a reason to keep going back and rescoring something? Is that something that Michigan State, as part of their doctoral education, is that something that they teach, that once you have a hypothesis, it's confirmed, that you keep going back and scoring it not once, not twice, but 3 times?
No.
Why would you, can you see any circumstance or any necessity to score something 3 times?
The only reason why I could see that someone would rescore it is if it wasn't scored properly the first time, or if they were trying to manipulate the data. I can't think of another reason why.
One of the other...
Again, the attack on Dr. Samuels, who rescored Jodie Arias' test, and she used the terminology to manipulate the data. So we'll see what the jury does with that. We'll take a break.